Okay, so now we're gonna get into my training arc, like what I like to call it. So this is when got moved to the intensive rehab unit, and basically all of the physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy I went through while I was trying to get back to being fully functional. So at the time, like I said, I had two broken legs, a broken arm, traumatic brain injury. So all of those things like were affecting how I was able to function on a regular basis. With both of my legs being broken, I couldn't walk, obviously. With my left arm being broken, which was my dominant hand, I couldn't use my left hand with anything, so I had to learn how to use my right hand with everything, from eating to grabbing things to picking things up. And I couldn't really train my left hand at the time because it was in a cast. So while I was healing and trying to get better, I was also trying to find different ways to improve. So every day I would have physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. I would usually have 2 sessions a day for all of the therapies, and they would usually be about like an hour each for each session, and it was very exhausting, but also I knew I needed to do these things in order to get back to where I wanted to be. Because I was like, I wasn't the cause of this accident. I don't drive, and not to put blame on anybody, but also like being a passenger and ending up in such a terrible situation did really traumatize me, especially since I already didn't drive, so I had to Uber around a lot. And after the accident, I had to Uber around even more, so that just caused more anxiety on me. And it's still anxiety I still carry with me, and I try to like release it and not allow it to hold me back, and not allow those fears to constantly pop up in my mind. With everything going on, my main focus was getting back to school because I tied a lot of my sense of self-worth and who I was as a person to school. School's always been something that just came easily to me, and I just want to be able to get back to that point in my life where I was able to excel and not feel like I was being a hindrance to anybody, or like people were only around because I was in such a terrible situation. And I didn't like feeling that way. I was really independent prior to the accident, so I wanted to get back to being able to do everything on my own. Since I was 18, I mostly lived on my own. I would come home during the summers, just like to visit and stuff, and on holidays. But outside of that, I was really living my own life, and I was happy with that. Like, I was really comfortable with where I was. So having to get into a position where I had to really be humbled and forced to rely on other people for things, from as simple as eating to using the bathroom to going to take a shower. I hated being in that position, but my family was really supportive during that time, and a lot of my friends like would call and check in, and that's like really what I needed, like in order for me to get some kind of sense of I'm not completely alone. Every day for a few weeks, while I was in the intensive rehab unit, I would do all of my sessions, and throughout the day it was very exhausting. It would happen like, I think I was there for 2 weeks and maybe 3 weeks. I don't know how long it was, but when I first started, I was doing it for like maybe 3 or 4 days, and they realized I still had fluid in my lungs, so I had to get they had to do a procedure in order to drain the fluid out of my lungs, and that was a very uncomfortable experience just because like the tubes were in between my ribs, so every time I moved, they would rub against my ribs, and it was a very excruciating pain. They had me on morphine at the time, I think, which I wasn't really a fan of, but I mean, I needed it for the pain, and that was the only way they could subdue it. So throughout that time, I was just coping with the pain, and I had to restart intensive rehab. So I was doing it for a few days, then I had to restart all the way back from the beginning, which was annoying, but also I knew was necessary in order for me to continue to progress. Also, since my phone was destroyed in the accident, I didn't really have a way of contacting anybody or responding to people, but I had my MacBook. So I was able to message people back on that, which was convenient, but also it was hard because I was typing with one hand because my left hand was broken. That was its own experience, and I had to really get used to doing that because even after the accident, like I said, I have nerve damage on my left arm, so I had to really get used to typing with one hand and doing basically everything with one hand. Now I'm able to do like some things with my left hand, but still not as much to the extent that I was doing prior, especially being a left hand dominant person. Throughout the accident, I was really delusional about getting back to school just because again, like I tied so much of my self-worth and who I was as a person to my success being a student, which I don't think you should ever tie any of your sense of self-worth to a school, a job, another person, anything to that extent, just because if that thing is gone, then you're still here, you're still you. So you have to expand beyond that. I really looked forward to my physical therapy sessions throughout the experience, and all of my sessions, just because like that was the few times throughout the day I was exposed to other people outside of my family. I love my family, I appreciate them, but seeing them all the time, every day, especially once like I moved closer, I appreciated them being there, but I felt like they were babying me, and I knew like with my therapist who I was working with in order to become more functional, that they would push me and ensure that I was picking up skills and continue to progress, while my family was trying to do things to help make things easier for me, which of course at the time I appreciated, but at the same time I liked being challenged and pushed because it helped me get stronger. A lot of the time when I was getting around, I was in a wheelchair, so I was mostly in a wheelchair because both of my legs were broken, but they also had to teach me how to use a walker. They would put me up in the walker and I would like hobble around in it because I couldn't use my left leg or my arms really, so I was kind of just like hopping and using my right leg for support. So the right side of my body is really strong because I had to use that as like my main mode of getting around, while also trying to like balance on the walker and just hop around. I'll include some clips just for context, but it was a challenge. And I know like toward the end of my experience being in the intensive rehab unit, when I was getting closer to leaving, they had to train me to be able to go up the stairs without putting any weight on my arms or my leg. So I would like have to scoot and bump up each stair with using like my elbows and my right leg, which was a challenge, but again, it was a necessary part of the process. Just doing that, whenever I was training, like I think the training stair that they had me on had like 4 or 5 stairs. My parents' house had like 15. So I would bump up like half the stairs at my parents' house, I would rest, and then I would bump up the rest. Which was, eventually I was able to go up all the stairs without having to stop and take a break, but initially that was my main mode of getting through it. Going back home, I really underestimated like the process when it came to getting into a car. I was just so excited to be finally leaving the hospital. I had been in hospitals for 43 days, so being able to leave, I felt like it didn't feel real at first, but I knew it was gonna come eventually, but they kept trying to keep me there because they were like, you need to do more, you need more physical therapy. I was like, just send me home. I'm getting depressed here. I'm having depressive thoughts, and usually I'm like just a very positive, uplifting person, but during that time, all the dark thoughts started creeping in because like I'll never get back to my life. My life is ruined. I'll never get back to school. I was worried about whether I was even going to be able to really advance in school because of my traumatic brain injury, and it really altered like the way I was thinking and like how I processed information, how I was like understanding things. So I didn't want it to be something that really just ruined all of the hard work I had worked for throughout undergrad and the year I had gone through previously in grad school. But yeah, I still have car anxiety, but it really hit me that I had car anxiety the first time I got into a car going home. I really just underestimated that entire experience because I thought it was just going to be something that was easy, but I guess because like I was thinking my body, I forgot about it, so because I don't remember anything from the accident, so but I guess my body remembers. Your body remembers things, like your body stores trauma, and so when I was going through that experience, I had to remind myself that my body still remembers the trauma. And so I would like focus on the music throughout the car ride in order to not become so panicked or disoriented from being in a car. And I still do that to this day to an extent, but also through therapy I was able to learn new tools as far as like breathing and like calming down my heart rate and not allowing those thoughts to like just overtake my entire experience as far as being in a car, which was very easy to do because of the trauma. Like I knew like being in a car was the root of my trauma. So anytime I got into a car and maybe somebody was driving crazy, I live in Atlanta, so people drive crazy all the time, which is annoying, but also it's just kind of comes with the territory. And I mean, it just kind of is what it is. Like, I wasn't driving before the accident, so after the accident, I knew I probably wasn't going to be driving ever again or ever in life. Just because, not because, I mean, part of it is that I'm scared to drive, but a big part of it is also just the fact that I'm almost 27. I've made it this far without driving. I might drive at some point just for the hell of it, like just to be able to learn how to do it and like to know I have that skill under my belt. But that would be very different just because like I can't hear out of my right ear. I have nerve damage on my left side of my body. I have double vision, so I have to like constantly bring two images together in order to see one image. Just things like that that continue to like affect me in my everyday life. I wouldn't want to be on the road and be a danger to other people. Once I transitioned to moving back home, I was mostly bedridden because I was wheelchair bound for the majority of my time in the ICU and in intensive rehab. So once I did finally get moved home, I was mostly in the bed. I would like move around like on occasion. Like sometimes I would go and bump down the stairs just so I could like move around, like get exposed to like more parts of the house and not be bound to my room all the time. I hated being in that room all the time. And I was already such an active person before the accident. Like not active like working out all the time, but I like to be out. I like to be around people. So being so isolated caused me to become more depressed and felt more alone. I went through all of my follow-up appointments within the few weeks after getting out of the hospital. And when I finally had all of my casts removed, I knew that I was free. I felt like I was free. And then I was able to start outpatient therapy once I got cleared by all of my doctors, which was a long and arduous process, but also it was just like, again, it was necessary in order for me to find some new sense of normalcy and also to learn how to work with all of my new disabilities that came with experiencing the accident. So when I started physical therapy, I would initially, they started off having me just stand and sit. So I would stand and sit every day, like over and over, in order to like strengthen my legs. And as I was learning things in physical therapy, I would incorporate that into my like everyday functioning and ensure that I was like continuing to build on those skills so that my body could continue to get stronger. I remember when I took my first few steps after like not walking for months. That was like in September. So I just continued to progress and I would take my first few steps, and when I finally learned how to walk, I would just practice whenever I could, and I would practice a lot at home with like of course help from my family because they needed to help me. I felt like I was a baby learning to walk again, and so that inspired me to start looking at videos of babies learning to walk. I would take my first few steps with like support of course from my walker mainly, or either somebody like walking around with me using my gait belt. So the gait belt like would go around my waist and like they would basically like just help me from either the side or from behind by like just holding me up while I would take my step, which helped me out a lot. And walking with the walker, again, it reminded me of babies learning how to walk. And so I would just continue like reading articles and stuff like that about babies learning to walk in order for me to know just how to progress in like a more natural way, so it didn't feel as foreign to me. So once I finally progressed to using my cane, that's when I felt like I was actually getting somewhere. My cane got me through a lot just because it helped me strengthen the other side of my body, because I had been using the walker and the wheelchair for so long that my left side was really weak compared to my right side. Because like my right leg, of course it was broken, but it wasn't as broken as my left leg. And my right arm was perfectly fine, and I was now right hand dominant. So just going through that transition and like learning how to incorporate all of my disabilities together in order to work toward like my progression. As I was learning to walk, my main goal was to be able to walk by the holidays. I wanted to be like that, to be like a gift to my family and to myself. I would just continue training at home. I started doing like walking practice all the time. That's when I continued to like, I started seeing like differences in how I was like excelling. And my family, they were really like just impressed with my progression, and my friends, like people I was seeing like my progression videos too. I got like a lot of support from the people who were closest to me at the time, but I also just still felt very alone and very broken just because, again, I was isolated a lot of the time because I had moved back home It was like an hour outside of the city. I didn't really have like a lot of people around me. So I really just learned to value my family a lot more just because they were the main people around me all the time. So yeah, I went from my wheelchair to my walker from my walker to my cane, and then I started walking on my own eventually with a lot of support. And while I was in physical therapy, once I was actually walking more regularly, they changed some of my physical PT days to hydrotherapy days. So I would get into like a pool and walk on like a treadmill in water. And those were my favorite days just because I was able to exercise in a different way. I like the variation, and then also it allowed me to have less intensity on my bones. So I wasn't as sore or in as much pain. Like I would be in pain like the following day, but it was like the muscles were growing pain, not this hurts pain. But once I was able to finally get to a place of walking more regularly, I was walking by the holiday, so I hit my goal. I had like, goals for everything. That's just the type of person I am. So I was able to walk, well, I guess kind of like hobble, limp around the house. And again, I was using like babies as a reference guide for me learning to walk. So I would walk like babies do. Like I would walk a short distance and then grab something for support and stop and rest for a bit. Then I'll continue just doing the same thing over and over. And that allowed me to eventually go longer spurts. And now I can basically walk without having to stop at any point, which is amazing. So in this next part, we're basically going to be talking about life after. In the next few months after like I learned how to walk and I really have progressed, I then moved on to just focusing on my mental health, getting back into school, which we'll get into like all the technicalities and like the struggles that came with that, especially like working back through school with a traumatic brain injury. Life was again very different, so I knew I was gonna have to tackle school in a different way moving forward. So we're just talking about my strategies with getting through that and how I was able to eventually graduate and move on with my life in a way, even though I was still just like processing everything I had gone through and just trying to find like the wisdom from God that this wasn't something that was going to break me and that I was continuing to like grow and excel in different ways. Life wasn't over for me. I had to just realize it was going to look different, and that thought process just came from therapy and processing the entire experience as a whole.